Jonathan, you're the new technology pioneer. We see all these new technologies, the Twitter, and it's not new anymore, but in the span of geologic time, the YouTubes and the Facebooks, and now we've got Skype, which is probably going to become a lot more viewed around the world as the broadband technology improves. But yet, it's not necessarily a career or a job. So you see Twitter, you see the internet, you see all these platforms, but how do you use it to actually how do you make the connection between all that technology and what you want to do and bring those two together?
I think that I think that what Geneva was talking about is actually very, very important. It's not so much about the technology, it's about how you use the technology. One of the things that I found, very confusing and frustrating early on when blogs first came along is that everyone sort of turned blogs into this bit of a cliche in terms of what blogs were, when in fact all blogs are yet another form of technology, not in the same way, at the same level as television or radio or the internet at a sort of a macro level, but they really are just one way of communicating via the internet as opposed to the type of content that gets distributed by blogs. So the same thing applies to Twitter, the same thing applies to Skype. It's how you use the technology and what the information is that you're conveying via that technology. So just to give an example, since you used Twitter as an example, we all saw, I think, what happened in Iran recently and how it became a very valuable way for people in Iran to communicate information both to each other and to the outside world. And I think that was a fascinating use of the technology. Other examples of that are our journalists at ABC News have been using Twitter, among other things, to report on events such as the recent pirate incident in Somalia. We also use it to conduct interviews. George Stephanopoulos has conducted interviews over it with folks like John McCain. And you also have many people posting things like, what I had for breakfast today. So I think that gives an idea of the range of what one little technology like that can be used for. So I think the real key, to get back to your question, is really what sort of work is being done using these technologies. And for journalists, the key is to be thinking about what is the journalism that you want to do, what is the journalism that needs to be done, what is the journalism that is most important, and then which technologies can be used to best communicate that. I think that there's a lot of potential as we look ahead. You were asking me before we started as to what's next after Twitter, if Skype might be the next thing on the horizon. I think it's impossible to predict, 2, 3, 5 years from now, whether Twitter is something that's going to last, whether it's Skype, whether it's going to be something new, like a new technology that Google just announced they're going to be building called Google Wave, which is meant to be a combination of social networks, email, Twitter, instant messenger, and a couple other things sort of all rolled into one. There's a lot of different possibilities, but in the end, I think what's important is that as journalists, we both, keep an eye on this, experiment with it, and learn what those new technologies are, but keep our eye on the real ball, which is the stories that we need to tell and the information that we need to communicate, and what our audiences most need to know from us.
And I have a follow-up question because I was just curious. At a certain point, there was an attempt to shut the internet down in Iran, but Twitter was still operational. So Twitter doesn't use the internet. It's actually different than the internet. In other words, that technology doesn't depend on having... Facebook is one website ultimately, but Twitter is fascinating because it's almost like once that genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. Nobody can really stop Twitter unless, they'd have to stop all the cell phone service throughout Iran?
Yeah, folks, it does use the internet in a certain way, but folks are able to connect, send messages to Twitter via cell phones, for example. I use my iPhone to do that. There's a number of different ways. You can also connect to it from the website. But one of the things that was happening in Iran is there was, there were a number of different ways, without getting too technical, that folks were trying to bypass some of the proxy blocking that was being set up in Iran to sort of get around it it's a bit of a game of cat and mouse going on there. And I think that the interesting thing there is two things. One is that when you start getting into technologies like this, there really isn't a way to sort of control the messages and the communication in a way that there may have been once in the past. So for Iran to try to stop communication coming out of the country, as we could see, was virtually impossible. And we're still at the really early stages of this. So once mobile becomes even more prominent, once technologies continue to evolve, it's going to be basically impossible to stamp out that type of communication, which I think is an amazingly fantastic thing for both democracy and journalism.
There is no such thing as a news blackout anymore. That's the bottom line. The information can come out and it can get to where it needs to go. And that alone is really fantastic and revolutionary. And bad news for dictators, let's hope. Well, Rossana, as the publisher and CEO of El Diario-La Prensa, I understand that Spanish language newspapers are faring better in this media revolution and the economic turmoil than some of the English language newspapers. Is that so? And if so, why is that so?
Well, it is so. I mean, I think we're the case study in many ways, my company, ImpreMedia and El Diario particularly, because as we are investing in this new media, and we have, the portal, and we have the Twittering, and which I really am bad at, but, thank God there are people in the newsroom who can do that. As we're doing that, we still have increases in circulation in the dinosaur part of the, company, which people find amazing, and we have increase in ad revenue in a very kind of downturn economy. And it's difficult to do. I mean, I think, your opening statement is, for me, depending on where you're standing, it's a revolution or it's an evolution, right? From where we are, it's an evolution, and we're trying to kind of follow the readership, which I think is the really important thing is those of us who have teenagers know that they access information completely differently than even though there are 3 papers delivered to my home every day. I pray that my 15-year-old will open one up eventually, but they access information differently. And I think we've really placed priority on delivering that content in whatever form is necessary. The truth is that as we build out all this new media, it's on the back of the legacy part of the business, because the newspapers are still delivering the advertising revenue to sustain, as we invest in the potential of that growth.
But let me ask you, for example, everybody's saying, well, Craigslist knocked out the classified ads. How has your classified ad department been impacted by Craigslist?
We have a very strong classified section, not just in El Diario and La Opinión and across the country. And I was speaking to an elected official last week in New York, and he said the same thing, Craigslist knocked you out of the box. And I said, well, if you're renting an apartment in Soho, you go to Craigslist. If you want to hire a dishwasher, you need to put an ad in El Diario. That's just the bottom line. So, there are categories that have suffered, but, the world has not changed. I think to Juan's point, there is a lot of hype that's forcing everyone in that direction, but at the end of the day, you still have kind of these two dynamics. Some of the difficulty I think we have, I think for young people starting out, it's a wonderful time in the business because the folks coming out of school now are just multimedia, animals, as opposed to some of the folks we still have in newsrooms who think that pushing to the web is a function of marketing. And, I think you have to really be aware, again, of how people are accessing. For example, while there's been a big push to the portal and to driving to the web, one of the most successful things we've done is the mobile alerts, because, in fact, many more of our readers have cell phones than have access to a computer, during the workday. So our ability to deliver mobile alerts, which have the latest, sports, or, whatever just happened in D.C. The Sonia Sotomayor nomination was kind of a big news day in that we were delivering the messages to our readers way before the morning paper, right? All day long we were, we had video, we had Twitter, we have a Facebook page, and Diario has a Facebook page. And, it's an amazing time. So I think there is this evolution, and depending on where you're standing, if you've lost your job in the last 2 years, it feels more like a revolution. But I think it is the kind of, we're on the right path, and I think we've been able to, I honestly feel that we in the Spanish language media have been able to handle these changes a little differently because we've always been in touch with our readers.